This is another evening in the series Offstage with the New York Philharmonic at Barnes & Noble. I'm Jeff Spurgeon from WQXR in New York, and we are indeed at the Barnes & Noble store on 66th and Broadway, just opposite Lincoln Center. And tonight it's a great privilege to share a few minutes and some music and conversation with one of America's great singers. This year he is the Mary and James G. Wallach Artist in Residence with the New York Philharmonic, first to occupy that position, and he's the Leonard Bernstein Scholar this year. An opera singer renowned all over the world, a concert singer, and a great champion, our greatest champion, I think we can say at this time, of the American art song, which is something that he is exploring more and more. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Thomas Hampson.
There we go.
Right, yeah. That's just the reception I knew you'd get here tonight.
There we go. Oh, yeah.
Knew it would be like that. I want to talk to you about how you began singing. You grew up in Spokane, which is sort of a Great Plains city, only far west, the edge of the Great Plains. And was there music in your family?
Oh, yes. My mother is a wonderful pianist and organist, and I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist, and in the education process, schools, a lot of music, a lot of chorus singing and bands, and just a lot of music. My two older sisters are also very musical. My oldest sister is probably more literarily oriented and went that direction. My next oldest sister is actually a composer and plays jazz piano and classic piano. So there's a lot of music in the house, and I played piano and drums and cornet and tuba. Actually, tuba I played for 5 years in the band. But then I had to decide between the band and the chorus, and the girls were so much cuter in the chorus. And so
well, those uniforms don't flatter anybody.
No.
So the band uniforms.
And so I went the vocal route.
Right. And when did you begin to study seriously singing?
Well, last week was a pretty challenging. Study seriously. Well, I love studying, and I studied everything, and that was kind of my problem because it was hard for me to get focused on something. And so I studied political science and have a degree in political science, an undergraduate degree, and then I was also taking music at another college, the public college at the time, and I had met this wonderful voice teacher who happened to be a nun, which was extremely exotic for a young Seventh-day Adventist raised child. By that time I had, she has to be let in. She's a really dear friend. Come on in. And it was an incredibly exotic experience for me, but she had studied with Claude Lehmann and Charles Panserat and some of the great singers, and had been given sort of carte blanche by the church to learn and become one of the great pedagogues, which she was. And she came up to me quite early when I was still in high school and said, what are your plans for college? And I said, well, I'm going to study law. I'd like to go international law or become a lawyer. And blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, that's a wonderful, young man. You clearly have a brain that should be trained. Sorry for the rhyme. But I perceive in you an artistic soul. And I think you should develop that as well.
And when
now, when you want to know more about that, you give me a call. And she walked off. Really. So I called her, and we had, and I studied with her for 7 years. She was the most fundamental teacher of voice for me.
And so you learned your greatest or most important technique lessons, or did she introduce you also to the song literature?
She was amazing. Of course, she was fanatical about the operatic literature. Look, in Spokane, Washington, it's not like we have a lot of opera going on, or then especially. So my lessons were without question first in German lieder and French chanson. And in fact, I had taken some German in high school, mainly because I took upper levels English, and to qualify for that or to stay in it, you had to take a second language. And since the teacher was German, kind of a no-brainer there. And the only listening laboratory was in fact for German. So we all took German. And we had a German chorus for singing carols and all that sort of thing. But So I knew something of German, and she knew that. So this wonderful Sister Marietta, so she says, well, you know German poetry has been set to music. And I said, really? Fantastic. Oh, yeah, you've probably heard of Schubert. Yeah, I heard of Schubert. I mean, you know, I just had not spent that much time in music at all. I mean, it was a tremendous awakening for me at 17. So she went over and she pulled out a stack of Schubert and Schumann and a pile of records of Hermann Prey and Fischer Dieskau and Tom Krause and Gerhard Husch. She said, go home, see if you like something, you know. Well, it was like giving a cat catnip or a drug addict opium or something. I was just, you know, I was just spinning. I was just spinning. And should we start? And she said, you know, and she said rather quickly on, she said, you know, I think you really are just a pretty natural singer, but that won't last, and that won't last for you. And you know, we need to teach you why and how you sing. So it was absolutely both things. And opera arias we studied as well, but they were really more for repertoire that you had to get ready for this or that competition or scholarship or something like that. It wasn't role preparation or anything like that.
And the performing aspect, was that something with which you were comfortable? Go ahead and take a drink. Was that something that you had to...
What do you mean?
Was that a difficult learning process? Some people love the music, love the singing, the crowd, not so much maybe.
Well, the first things I ever did were really concerts. And Spokane was right at an apex. The Spokane Symphony is actually quite a marvelous regional symphony. And there was a man named Donald Tulin who became the national director of the American Symphony League after a while. And he was there, and it was sort of at a zenith because he'd really built the orchestra in the community. And then there was the World's Fair, and I was a kid there in the Spokane World's Fair, and actually I sang with Richard Tucker. I was in the boys' chorus of I Pagliacci. He died 7 months later. It was the last performance of Pagliacci, was in Spokane, but there was a lot of concerts, and so I sang for Tulin, and you know I started with Pilate and St. John's Passion and moved up to, I don't know, Herod maybe, I don't know, and then I did some arias, and then the coup de grace was that he invited me to come sing the Messiah. And at that time, my voice was a rather soft-grained bass baritone kind of thing with an upper extension. So even the first auditions that I did, I sang an awful lot of Leporello's arias and Figaro's arias and that kind of thing.
How old are you at this time?
20, in 1920. At the same time, I'm still in school, and I'm the student body president of the Eastern Washington University, and studying political science, and getting very close to the legal profession, realizing this is not fun. These people work way too hard. So it was a. But I must say, you know, it's fun to talk about it, and it's a great conversation. But there is something about. You know, I had an amazing experience. I mean, my favorite motto in life is "Fortune favors the prepared mind." Now, I now know that actual quote comes from probably a turn of the century scientist, Fournier. But it actually has resonances. It's used a lot in the business world now, as you can imagine. But actually, it started actually as a scientific warning. In other words, if you're working on scientific things, that if you stay at it and so forth. And then it's become sort of this adage for life. It's a truism in life. And this man sort of came up and planted this in my mind at a library concert I was doing, and gave me his card. And of course the numbers never work, and I've never heard from him again, and you know, whatever else. And it's always been that sort of boogie thing. But the point is that everything that happened to me at that time, and actually has happened, has been getting ready for the next layer of rose petals that, you know, go out. And of course there's a great deal of manure involved in that process, but you know, if you believe, it's not just serendipity, it's not just luck. It's working as hard as you can and as focused as you can at the time of your life you are, because you are going to go somewhere else. And prepare yourself for what it is that you can't possibly know what's going to happen. And I felt very early on that kind of focus and drive.